Awesome. Well, I think I'm just going to kind of run down mostly the work I've been doing for the last 4 years. It seems I kind of reinvent myself every 4 years or so, and I've done just that since I got to San Francisco. So I've got this whole new performance rig, and I've been writing new songs, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through this process to have a complete album and a whole new performance and kind of a whole new sound. So that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. I moved to San Francisco, I think about 4.5 years ago, and kind of rocked my world. That was when I put out my last album, this cool little circuit board CD artwork that went with it. And I started doing a new show with this new instrument, the MOJO, and I was playing guitar for the first time and doing some vocals on like 1 or 2 songs for the first time also. And a lot of stuff happened right around that time. Moving across the country is kind of wild. I also I lost my sister at that time, and I broke up with the girl I moved out here to be with, and things kind of tanked for my career for a while when the economy went sour. That was happening kind of roughly in like the 6 months after I moved here. So it sort of changed my life in a lot of big ways. And when I started putting my life back together over the course of the next few years, my perspective on life, and particularly on music, which has been the focus of so much of my life, changed in some big ways. And the biggest thing was that in my sister's stuff, you leave a lot of stuff sometimes when you leave. I found all these recordings, like all the tapes and CDs. You can remember those things that I gave to the people closest to me, even before I started, mass duplicating physical media. So she had copies of like every recording I've ever made, going all the way back to my first recording, which was made on a 4-track cassette recorder. Anybody have a 4-track cassette recorder when they were younger? A few guys. So this is cool. It's kind of like an iconic piece of music recording technology. And that's what I had in high school. I didn't have any musical training. I just sort of taught myself to play guitar and to sing, and I was trying to form rock bands in my little Washington, D.C. suburb. And the music I was writing was really simple. It was just imitating stuff I heard on the radio, records that my older siblings had gifted down to me. And when I heard this tape, like the quality of the recording was terrible. Songwriting wasn't all that impressive. The performances were pretty crappy, but the core of it, the music that was there, had a whole lot of just soul and heart and purity and simplicity that I find not present in the music I was making at that time, and I'd made up to that time. It was really complex. I was trying to cram all this information into one piece of music and spending several hundred hours even on just like a 5 or 6 minute piece of music, and just trying to make it so dense in all these different ways that I think I kind of squeezed some of the soul out of it. So I decided to go back to that simplicity. So I'm going to show you guys more or less the process I've been going through. So I just started writing songs with guitar and voice and no technology whatsoever. So if you guys have been following me, I'm kind of like technology geek, and I still love all this stuff, and that's why I'm still performing with it. But I went back to just writing songs. So this is an unfinished song, but this is kind of how they start off as lyrics and lead sheets, just sketching down the chords I need to remember. And this one's gone through many revisions, but most of it just starts with like acoustic guitar and voice. And actually even before that, I started using this 1-track or 2-track recorder, just using the voice recorder on my mobile device. So like here's a song I started writing yesterday, and this probably sounds terrible, but this is actually how these songs start. Brother, it's okay. I know you can't say what they did to you. Brother, it's okay. I know you can't say which way they went you. So you get the idea. I've been sort of reteaching myself songwriting and singing also. That vocal performance was not my greatest you just heard there. Getting over a cold and talking for 2 hours is going to be kind of rough for me today. And certainly singing will be. So that's been really challenging, but also really exciting because songwriting is one of these things I kind of lost touch with that I really love, which is the way that a lot of people came to music. Like, how many of you guys would say you listen to vocal music, to pop music as like a thing you're really into? Okay, about half of you. I came to instrumental music and electronic music much later in my life, so it was kind of a new thing, and I still love it. And there's big components of that in the music on my last album, the music I've been playing for like the last 6 or 8 years. But the new stuff, I decided I just wanted to be built on this core of songwriting, because I also listen to a lot of electronic music that I love, which is based on songs like Bjork and 9 Inch Nails and things like that, where there's you strip all that stuff away, and if you hear like Johnny Cash play that 9 Inch Nails song, you're like, oh yeah, that's like, it's just a song behind all that crazy stuff. So that's kind of the direction I'm going, or have been going. So I've got all these songs. There's like way too many to count, and they end up on lead sheets, and they often get rewritten many times. So just sharing some of the process. Like, I don't know if I have all the old files. This is cache number 8, but there's caches 1 through 7 around here somewhere. And even in cache 8, there's like, this is a verse, and that's a chorus in progress. This is another verse. And these are all lyrics that are like maybe getting used, maybe not getting used. So there's still, this one's kind of wordy. Some of them are not so much. But there's this long process of revision that happens to the songs. And I guess I'm just sharing that. Some of them are much simpler songs, but I get in the habit of kind of like numbering files and keeping older lyrics around, because sometimes actually I find that in the revision process, like the original ideas were better, and I wind up going back to those. So that's a cool thing about songwriting with the computer like this. If you guys have questions at any point, feel free to throw a hand up. Still kind of in story mode here, so maybe a little early, but if anything's unclear or you're curious to know more. So anyways, I started writing songs, and then the idea was the big revelation I had was basically to skip over the production process, because the way I did my last album, it was all done in the studio. I tried to do this kind of very isolated. I wrote and recorded and mixed the entire album like almost entirely by myself. There was a few points where I started going to friends who are mix engineers and being like, hey, can you give me some tips? Or taking the song to like, somebody associated with a record label and be like, hey, do you think, labels would be interested in this? How can I mold this? But it was a very, very insular process, and I was kind of imitating one of my favorite artists, Square Pusher, who's this like super prolific composer and apparently does all this stuff himself, which is awesome. So I wanted to kind of try doing that. And so in contrast, on this album, I'm kind of opening up and trying to work with more people in ways that make sense. So I've done some things like see what it's like to play with other musicians. I'm going to work with a mix engineer for sure. I've done a lot of back and forth, like bringing people over to my home, playing them these super demo-y songs and getting feedback on them at early stages, getting mentoring from a vocal teacher, other songwriters who know more about songwriting, a lot of other live electronic performers, other controllerists who've been helping me shape this whole way that I perform the thing. So it's much more like that. And in the same spirit of that, what I decided to do is not to carry this through and complete an album. Because one of the problems I had when I released that album was like, oh, now I got to perform this thing. Like I spent, thousands of hours in the studio sculpting this like piece of perfection, and now I'm supposed to like do it better or more exciting and live, And that was just kind of daunting, and it felt like I don't want to remix it. Like it's really good the way I did it. I just want to play that. So I wound up doing, playing the lead guitar parts, if there was a vocal thing, doing that, and then doing a lot of like controllerism, like chopping up and kind of remixing the stuff I had recorded. But it felt kind of like a step backwards, and I didn't want to do that again. And I was really inspired. I think one of the moments of inspiration came hanging out with my friend Edison, who's been performing for several years with mono, and he's got this really compelling performance. And what's coolest about it is it's so close to his production process. He limits himself to basically like 4 tracks. Like he makes beats, bass lines, and then 2 other tracks for like melody or sounds or whatever. And then he's got this like layout on his mono where he can play the whole thing in real time, and he just triggers little pieces of it. So he's playing the drums, and then he adds in the bass line, you know, and then he hits this button once every bar, and it gets this little thing on top. And he just did that a whole bunch, and he was able to create all this music, and there was never any question about, like, how does he perform it? Because the process of, you know, sort of putting the music together had this fairly strict set of rules, more or less, that allowed him to perform it really easily. And there was never any question in that. So I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to think about the performance and develop the performance before doing any of the recording. And what's cool about that is I can take this music out where it's still unfinished, you know? And that song, Plastic Smile, is definitely not finished. I was like changing the chorus, the hook, Plastic Smile. I didn't know if that was a cool hook or not. I've decided it is, so it's staying, but I was still changing that up until last week. And I took all this stuff in even more demo-y form on tour last fall, and that was sort of like, you know, proof is in the pudding, and I learned a lot, you know, just taking something super basic, you know, and trying to perform it, you know, with all this stuff. So yeah, so performing, and then production is a whole separate process where I take all this stuff out of this performance setup, and I'm using a different piece of software. And I'm using a recording engineer to help me with the vocals, and it's kind of a whole different thing to produce. So what I could do for you guys today is explain this whole rig, which I think is kind of innovative. You know, the music recordings and the songs are cool, I think. But you know, the sonic stuff you're going to hear is not super compelling. But what I've tried to do is come up with a performance system which is engaging for, you know, regular audiences, where I can present a solo performance. You know, that kind of like captures people's attention, delivers this music with a lot of authenticity, and translates this musical journey that I've been creating for the last 4 years. So the performance aesthetic, I did a lot of thinking since my last album about what is cool to see people do on stage. There's this really big, wide open question for you if you're performing electronic music, even if you're performing, you know, whatever, so-called like acoustic, or I don't know what they call the non EDM these days. Is it acoustic dance music or acoustic non-dancing music? I don't know. We've got broad genres. I've seen a lot of rock bands with, you know, an Ableton backing track, and I've seen, you know, all kinds of hybrids. So it's a big question. What are you going to do on stage? Apparently, we're going to hand over some of our responsibilities to machines. You know, that can be playing back sequences. There's obviously nobody playing that, and audiences are getting more savvy. You know, my audiences, there's more controllerists. There's more people who actually have these tools and are doing this kind of thing, and there's more people who, you know, are general music fans who used to only understand drums and guitars and saxophones, who now kind of get it when they see a DJ, you know, and they kind of get it when they see a controllerist. There's more understanding happening. I no longer have to be like poster boy for controllerism because there's enough understanding out there, which is great. So anyways, the question is, what are you going to do? What's compelling? I'll ask you guys. What do you think is compelling to see people do on stage?
Not head down.
Not head down. So like this is not your performance aesthetic? Yeah. How about dancing? Like when I got this headset, it kind of makes me want to, like, you know, I don't know, do some of that. Dancing, a lot of people love to see that, like a front man or a front woman, you know, singing and like seriously doing some moves. I've seen some awesome stuff like that recently. Anything else?
Interesting effects that you've never heard before, or like homemade things that you've never seen before.
Interesting effects you've never heard before, or homemade things you've never seen before. Awesome, yeah. I'm trying to do that with my vocal effects. I don't know if you heard any of those. Well, my computer's not happy. Yeah, and things you've never seen before, right? Like there's on the big scale, there's like giant projection mapping stages happening. That's kind of a big thing. Is like, you know, I don't know. In the '80s, I remember there's lots of explosions and lights and pyrotechnics and costumes, and now it seems like we've got cool interactive video technologies filling that space. And I'm kind of trying to do that a little bit by developing instruments that have never really been made. But yeah, so those are all good things. I decided what I can do that is most compelling for people to see is to play live instruments. I think it's kind of cool when you see somebody, you know, even if it's not full of effects or whatnot, just, you know, making some sounds with an instrument you recognize and you can, locate by ear. And particularly with vocals, if you're going to do vocal music and you sing the vocal live, I think the more live it is, and the more people can feel it, and the more there's a direct connection. Okay, sounding better. The more they can connect with that vocal, particularly, like, the more compelling the performance is. And the other thing I decided as far as this, like, what are you going to do? Which activity do you choose to do, and which do you, like, relegate to the computer? It was kind of like the idea that doing one thing at a time is really okay, and it's still something I'm trying to grapple with. But, like, just singing and maybe, like, hitting a button to catch an echo. That's, like, all I do. I try to make that all I do, and maybe I do a gesture down here, but I've decided it's really compelling just to watch one human being do one thing at a time rather than, like, fight the urge to, like, be manipulating things here and here and playing guitar here and doing this. So my rules are more or less do one thing at a time, and then do, this came to me at a great concert I saw. The artist's name is escaping me right now. But it was the idea that, like, the audience's attention can only follow one thing at a time anyway. Even if it's like a whole band full of people, there's really usually only like one solo happening, or maybe there's like two people trading or something. But there's never usually more than like one thing that you're fully focused on. I mean, it's cool if you have lights and video and other stuff going on too. That's a great ideal, but can only really watch one thing at a time. So it was that too. It was like, I'm either just going to play the guitar or just play vocals or manipulate these backing tracks. I'm not going to do any live looping. That's like a whole big rabbit hole. And that was about it. So that is what led me to my current performance aesthetic, which you've already seen a taste of. Any questions about that? I don't think I've gotten a question yet, except for...
You're not going to do that at all?
I'm not going to do multiple things at all? Well, I've tried. I tried that in my last performance. That's what led me to building the Robocaster, actually, was those scant moments where I would be playing guitar and I'd do something on the MOJO. This is before I had a guitar with controls on it. For my last album performance, if there were effects in a song, they were just kind of pre-programmed to change with the sections of the song. So I'd go to the chorus and I'd have more distortion or something, go back to the verse and I wouldn't have that. That was about all that happened with guitar effects. It was pretty much just like, this is a guitar, it sounds like a guitar, there's no pedal board, there's nothing going on with effects really. But there were times when I'd just be improvising and going off and be playing guitar and then do some effects on the MOJO, and those were moments that were really cool sometimes. So that led me to this. So this is also kind of part of the performance aesthetic too, I guess, is making instruments that are sort of like these one things. It's obvious that I could do the kind of things I'm doing with this guitar, like with this controller right here. I could do the kind of things I'm doing. These are just 8 buttons, clamped onto my microphone. I could do that with 8 buttons down here, no problem. But the reason is to kind of try and make these more cohesive instruments, because I feel like that not only draws my attention to what I'm doing, that one thing at a time that I want to do, it also does the same thing for the audience. And I feel like it just makes a more cohesive experience. We can break all the rules with these digital tools, and I can have a button here that changes the lights and triggers a video and starts the drum loop playing and does 10 different things. But if it doesn't feel like it should do that, and if the audience can't perceive that it's doing that, it's almost like, should I do that? I don't know. So as much as possible, I avoid doing multiple things at once. That's the ideal anyway. Sometimes it's hard not to. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's talk about some technical stuff. I feel like I've been talking, and we should show you some of what's going on. So the big theme for the album became 4-track, inspired by, partially by seeing the simplicity of Edison's set, and also by that 4-track cassette recording, seeing how much you can do with just 4 tracks. Having kind of a 5-track system for the last album, and thinking about sometimes, well, maybe I could simplify it even more, keep it simple. So that's what I've done. So after I write a song, I basically record it into Ableton, really quick and dirty, and I can probably play you a song that's still in its very first stages. Here goes. We were just about to get into the intensity of the Ableton session. But I can explain the first few steps anyways. So I just record. I told you I write these things on acoustic guitar and voice. So then I just record that guitar part as is into the computer, and then I record the vocal part on top of it. So all these other things get built on that guitar and on that vocal, and starting with the core of that song, I think really helps build this, cohesive structure around it that's true to the song, and it keeps it true to the original vibe, but lets me develop it. I did a lot of thinking about sort of like the structure of the Ableton set and what to use to make all these sounds. Tried out a whole bunch of different ideas. I can explain that 4-track concept a little further. So the idea with 4 tracks was just to simplify things, have only 4 backing tracks at a time, keep it real simple. For the most part, it's drums, bass, guitars, and then other stuff. And those are under the control of my four fingers here. Yeah, well, how about this? I'm just going to do a quick little demo of how I would have recorded that song, Plastic. So here's my guitar track. You can see my guitar. I'm just going to add a record button here, put the click track on. We happen to know the BPM for this song is 138, but that's kind of the first thing I figure out. And how's this song go? So that's what I would do first. Then I would add an audio track real quick. Go to its input-output settings. Route it from my live guitar track. Arm it for recording. And this is just to print the effects. There's a whole bunch of effects on my guitar. Distortion and whatnot. So this just prints the effects to an audio clip. Oop. Let's do that. I sure can. Oh, I turned on the volume. I just made an empty audio track here. If you hit Command-T, that's a good shortcut for that. And I armed it for recording, and it's taking the audio from this track, GT Live. This is my live guitar track, and it's the one where we just recorded this audio clip. So now I'm going to play it back as a way to print an audio file with all the effects. So here goes. So I would pull this over to my guitar track. I'd get rid of that recording. We'll keep this audio track here because we might want to use it. I put my click track back on. I might trim this up and just loop one section of it. I've gotten really into like looping, doing a lot of looping, of short parts. My last album, it was all about like through composed, making it sound like I had played the whole thing all the way through. And now I'm just into like, if it's just a 1-bar, 2-bar phrase, just loop 1 or 2 bars. So turn up guitar. And then I'll record a scratch vocal. So this is where my vocals are coming in. See that meter bumping under Vox Live. I know you've been drinking by the way that you buy. I know you've been smoking because we ain't had a fight. And I would often do all the sections of the song, like play the verse on the guitar, into the chorus, into the bridge or whatever, just to get it done. That's another one of my things is like just get it done. trying to get really efficient in the writing process and not sweat the details, until the basic idea is in there. So here's that vocal recording. I know you've been drinking by the way that you buy. So I just keep the vocal recordings around often. They don't typically go to another guitar track. Oh, yeah. I'll explain the tracks real quick. So these first 4 tracks, this is guitar stuff, this is drum stuff, bass stuff, and other stuff. And I'll get into like what that stuff is. But those are the 4 tracks that I control from the MOJO. And I'm just recording those, showing you the process of how I would create those for a song, like the one you just heard at the beginning. So, yes, so there's the guitar part, there's the vocal part. The next thing would be to sequence a drum part. So I've got like a basic set of drum samples set up, and I don't have my MIDI keyboard on which to play those. So we'll just pop open the drum track, and I'll show you that. Unlike the guitar track, which is set up for audio clips, these are all sort of rhythm guitar tracks. I know you've been drinking. Kill the vocals. I'll play you the guitar parts for the different sections of this song. So those are how they wind up, but in the beginning they just start as that sort of basic guitar part that I wrote and recorded, which is this. And the next thing I do is I go to my drum track and I sequence a drum part, and I have a set of sort of basic drum samples that I've come up with. All these songs start off with the same drum kit, the same kick, snare, and hi-hat, just so that I can start sequencing things quickly and not have to worry about like searching for a snare drum, searching for a kick drum. Again, just trying to like get through this writing process more quickly, get to something that's more playable and malleable, and think more about the sections of the song and the groove of the different parts, and the ideas more than like the details of sound design, which I get to later. So this one's got, again, some more stuff going on. Let me hide this input-output section. But here's the drum part. Let's turn all these up. I think I can just mute all this extra stuff. Yeah. So all of this, just move that out of the way. So this is what I would do next, is sequence a basic drum part like what you see here. And that's meant to go along with this guitar part, of course. I'll assume you guys more or less know how to record drum sequences. The next thing I'll do is put the bass in. So not even worrying about making cool drum sounds or making fancy drum parts. And I have a bass synthesizer already in here. I'm using FM8. It's an FM synthesizer. It's got a lot of cool sounds. I just had to use this one because it's really CPU efficient. Doesn't use up too much juice compared to some other really cool synthesizers I've played with. And with FM synthesis, you could do a lot of fun sounds. So I have some presets in there that I've already designed, but I more or less find a preset that sounds more or less like what I want, and then I just start writing the bass line. So here's a very simple bass line that I sequenced. Let's solo that. And so then I've got my basic thing. I've got guitar, bass, drums, and vocals. Let's unsolo. We've got something soloed in here. I know you've been drinking by the way that you buy. I know you've been smoking because we ain't had a fight. So at that point, I can actually perform the song in a lot of interesting ways. So just with that section of it, I can say like, well, what's the intro of the song going to be like? Maybe I'll start with just the guitar part. Oh, oops. Got to go back to this song. Put our just recorded guitar in there. Maybe I'll... Maybe I can start thinking about what lead stuff I'm going to play on top of that if I want like a catchy melody or a hook or something. I know you've been drinking. So the idea with that is it's like a shortcut to being able to perform the music and not worrying too much about anything except just getting it to a point where I can mess around with the sounds here. And of course, there's a lot of work that goes into setting up this template, and there was work that went into like selecting those core drum sounds and those core bass sounds from which to choose from. But what's cool is I have this fluid thing that I can like take these songs and put them in there and have something performable, and then I can start working out the arrangement and thinking about how the song sounds, you know, from beginning to end. And that's one of the coolest things about Ableton, which I never actually used it for before this, was this like non-linear arrangement where you can decide like how many times are we going to play the chorus the second time. Maybe we should start the song with the chorus, you know. You can just play around with all that stuff if you have a template that you can like flow these songs into quickly. And I find that is one of the coolest things about this. Question?
Yeah. So you built basically your controller inside your guitar, right?
Yes, yes.
I've got a question. Like, did you rip apart a MIDI controller and then just implement? Oh, sorry. Did you rip apart an old MIDI controller and then just implement it into your guitar, or did you make it from like scratch?
As part of the process, I did. Yeah. I'm going to talk about this next. This is the very next thing on the list. So I'll go into like the whole process of creating this. But are there any questions about that process of sort of like taking raw ideas, getting them into Ableton quickly in a way that they can be sort of performed? Okay, cool. I'm just going to show you one more thing, which is like, how do I get from a guitar part like this, oh, not like that, but like this, to one like this, or like this. What is up with the CPU today? Let's quit that. And that's just the process of like taking this into arrangement view. So this is the clip that I recorded with some extra distortion. We can pull that over here into Ableton's other universe. So here's the clip in arrangement view, and this little play button right here. This tells it to play, tells Ableton to play from this timeline instead of from the other universe we were just looking at. So when I hit that, it's going to play from this timeline, whatever's happening on this timeline. And so I could still play my other parts. And then I can do things like edit this. And so I'm doing that a lot with my guitars for this recording. So doing this kind of thing. This is just copying and pasting and doing stuff like that. And also, you know, cutting and reversing. Okay, yeah, so I was just showing you the kind of stuttering, editing, reversing kind of stuff that I like to do to guitars. Also, you know, just removing sections, like so. And just moving things around until I get something that sounds cool. Usually I have ideas that I'm thinking about and trying to make them happen, and I try to make it line up with the drums and the bass kind of things. But I'm just showing the basic techniques, which are gapping, copying and pasting, aka stuttering, and reversing sections. So I just want to show you how I come up with things like this. So that's one that I spent more time on and came up with something that I think is really cool. It was also recorded with an acoustic guitar. But that's kind of like adding the flavor to the guitars. I do the same thing with the drums by just layering sounds on top. So I go into my drum sampler, and this is a sequence of stuff that I added on top. So on the drums, without the spice, I'm just moving the notes so they don't play anything. So I went back in, added some more sounds to my sampler, and added these little things. Oop. And we're not hearing them, 'cause why? Well, I'll play some. Well, I'll show you what's going on here real quick if you're curious. So I use this drum sampler battery. Product not found. Oh, hey. It's used to having a hard drive connected. That's not here today. But the sounds were playing before. I'm so confused. Well, anyways, the concept is there. It's just adding stuff on top of that. And with the bass, I start adding envelopes to modulate the sound and doing stuff like this. I'll give you a better example. So the basic bass line is just this. And with some FM modulation, you get this. And then I use my fourth track to add cool little sound effect-y kind of things on top. Stuff like this. So that's how I wind up with all the layers of spiciness that go from that sort of bare recording that we made really quickly to something that sounds fuller, like this. Any questions on that? Yeah.
As you open these up a little bit more, the 4 tracks are maybe more like 4 stems?
Yeah.
Okay. So you just try to categorize what layers you want into different stems, I guess?
Yeah, I tried. I don't layer too many things in a stem. Like on drums, like I'll add percussion to the drums. On bass, it's never more than one note at a time on the bass track. On the guitar track, I tried some layering things and decided no, like the guitar is just going to be one sound at a time. And I broke that rule here and gave myself 2 audio tracks to do, supplementary parts. And that's just because I couldn't make up my mind sometimes. It would be like I'd add like a little thing, like this, which is so subtle. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then after a while, like I want to keep that, but I decided I wanted the same thing, but kind of more intense. So I just added. But you're correct in saying that they're more stems. That's how I'm thinking of them. But conceptually, just having 4 tracks and trying to limit myself to like only writing 4 parts for the most part keeps the music kind of simple and prevents me from getting into like, I think there should be a string orchestra here, and the oboes should come in, and and then the laser beam kind of meow 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 should I don't want to get into orchestration. The whole idea here is to kind of go through the traditional recording process a little bit more and like sectionalize things a little bit, so I don't go insane trying to be all these different things, including instrument designer, like at the same time. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
I was wondering, when you were playing the different guitar parts, I don't know if I know how to really...
Could you guys wait for the microphone?
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry. when you're writing the different guitar parts, I mean, it almost seems like you could do like an infinite number of amount of noodling with creating different ways of doing that one part.
Yeah.
Do you kind of have the whole thing kind of thought out in your head, and then you're trying to kind of modulate within that song, or are you just kind of messing around, and then at what point are you like, okay, I need to stop and move on? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm skipping over part of the process, which is working out these ideas, and I have a good sort of process tip for that, I think. Can you guys hear this okay? Okay. So like I just laid down the guitar part, right? And it was like, you know, deactivated my guitar thingy. You know that. That was a whole process of like, you know, it started as like, or something like that, you know, just like little power chords, and coming up with that riff with several iterations of this sort of like brainstorming process. So the thing I do generally is I'll record 3 ideas, like kind of just boom, the first 3 things that I can work out, and not like trying to really develop those, but for an idea like that, being like, okay, here's the basic idea. You know, what could be cooler than that? Maybe like, maybe something with like chukka chukkas, or that finger picking thing I came up with, or maybe something, you know, related to that. So that's working with my facility on this instrument, but just coming up with 3 ideas and boom, 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 recording those, and then forgetting about it for a day and coming back to it tomorrow. So I would realistically record, you know, like I did this one thing. I'd record all 3 of those ideas, make them 3 different clips, and then come back to that tomorrow. And the same thing with like the drum grooves, you know, it'd be like, well, I'll play this one groove, this like simple, maybe I'll do something with the hi-hat, like, you know, and then I'll do something else with like 16th notes hi-hats, you know, I can't beatbox that one, but, you know, doing 3 drum parts really quickly without analyzing, and then moving on. And the same thing with that stutter editing on the guitar, you know, like just do some chopping and whatever, you know, and then come back to it the next day. And that really helps me kind of move forward, keep things on point, as far as like staying productive while staying creative. So that's kind of like one of my new rules of thumb, is like just come up with 3 ideas, get them down there, don't analyze them. I guess the big idea is separate the creation, the playing, from the editing, the revision. You know, you can't really do those 2 things simultaneously, I find, and that's where I've pulled out most of my hair still, but the hairs that have been pulled out have been in that process of like, you know, I wrote a line, you know, like when, like, that's why this is cool, this like little recording tool, and I just like sing into it, because there is no editing. You're just making a sound file, you know, and sort of like removing that possibility is what makes it work. And similarly, you know, like if you write lyrics on a sheet of paper or whatever, you know, don't write 2 lines and then go back and edit it. Write like a page, you know, and maybe you're going to throw away like 2/3 of it. But, you know, that's really the process. It's like create, revise, create, revise. At least for me, anyways. But I think that helps. Yeah. Oh, you gotta wait. Should we wait for the mic? I can also repeat questions. Over the mic.
I noticed that you have, some of your clips have a lot of word markers and some of them don't. Can you talk about how you use word markers?
Yeah, I use word markers similarly to that chopping kind of thing I was doing. Trying to find something with word markers. Scrape had word markers. Where are we at? We're at song 15. I think, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like finally getting into Ableton as a composition tool, which is really, it was made for like writing stuff and performing it. It's really made for this kind of process. When you get into the production tools that Ableton has, that's when it doesn't have everything that like Logic or Pro Tools has, right? And I don't think it's supposed to, in my mind. It wasn't designed that way. So I don't really miss those things. I never tried to use it as like a complete production solution. But it's so fast for like coming up with ideas and editing those ideas. So what is going on with Scrape? We can delete some markers and find out. I think it was just to tighten up the timing there. I'll use these to like correct things. Like in that guitar part I played, like instead of like going back and recording it more tightly, I'll just use the warp markers to fix it. I've gotten into this whole opposite mindset. On my last album, I tried to make everything sound organic, and now I'm just like, screw it. Like it's all gonna be synthetic. Like do crazy time stretching. Like I was modifying this song, the chorus for this song, Alone. What's the chorus? When I care, alone I go, alone I stay, alone's the one place I know. We learn. So I just time stretched all these clips. Like I wanted some wacky transition from the chorus to the bridge, and I decided, I want that chord to hold out for like a bar, another 2 bars. You know, sometimes music will do that. It'll just kind of fake you out. You know, add an extra bar here, 2 bars there. And I wanted to do that, and I was like, oh man, I don't have to go in and edit all those clips, whatever. So I just used some beautiful warp markers and stretched the heck out of this guitar. So I think it sounds kind of horribly obnoxious, but it was a quick way to get it done. And if I decide in the production phases, like, that doesn't sound good, I'll, re-record that, do some other fancier time stretching algorithm. But yeah, just get it done. Don't care if it sounds digital. I'm into like the 2-bar loops, like if it's a 2-bar phrase, make it a 2-bar loop, and worry about, changing it and morphing it at some point later. Cool. So I can get into like talking about gadgetry, physical stuff, if you guys have an idea on that. So this was the core of it all. Was like, let me build a system that's really easy for me to like put my core songs into and make them something I can perform really quickly, and let me continue the writing process there, because you find a lot of things like, oh wait, I don't know if this chorus really goes right to this bridge, when I'm playing it with my band here, Like, I play the chorus again, guys. No, wait, play it again. This is how I come up with the arrangement, is just like figuring out, what's the intro for this song? Do I start with the chorus? I kind of already showed you that, but this is also how I work out like transitions from section to section, is I've got like my whole thing here. It's kind of in my head, like at the same time in life when I was writing the simple music that I've referred to as the seed of all this stuff. I was playing in bands, and there's this really cool kind of like organic thing, when you're trying to get a band to play the ideas in your head, where some of it comes back like, oh, I don't have an idea for the transition from that section to that section. Maybe you've got an idea, or yeah, I've got an idea. And this is kind of that process happening, kind of internally with the machine and with these sort of like synthetic other musicians that I have here. Yeah. Cool. All right. So in redesigning the rig, I decided I wanted to be able to improvise more with the vocals and the guitar effects, right? Because I didn't have that in my last rig. I had no guitar effects. Most guitar players, maybe we should do a break. Yeah, we should do a break. I'm going to do some CPU troubleshooting. And you guys take a break. Please come back with refreshed, receptive sponge brains. So 10 minutes.